All right, this is for my communications 105 informative speech. I have 5 people just due to restrictions. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My son is asleep, otherwise he would be 5.5, rounded up to 6. But I'll just go ahead and start my speech here then. You want to, right here, thanks. So, hot topic issue today in the United States is colonization, right? We're looking at people talking for freedoms of others and everything else. But when we look at colonization as a big hot topic issue, a lot of people only speak on the United States as though we were the only ones to ever be colonized. But what about other countries? What about the rest of the world and the different places that we've been? What about Latin America? When you look at different countries there like Peru, we see that colonization has happened multiple times. And colonization in Peru happened between Spain and the indigenous Incan people. So what happens when these two worlds collide? I'm originally of Peruvian descent, and I believe I'm credible to speak on this because of the stories that I grew up on in the history of my family. So when we look at the history, we think of the Incas, we think of the conquistadors, the Spaniards, and what really happened. When we look at the Incan people, we look at about 133 years of a strong empire that lasted from 1400s to 1533. It was built all the way up to Colombia, down to the coast of Chile, encompassing multiple Latin American countries we know today. This indigenous population had a central government, its own language, and a form of written communication that was done through knots and symbols and rope. They spoke Quechua, and they had a political figurehead called the Sapa Inca, Sapa meaning only one. They were led at the end by half-brothers Huáscar and Atahualpa. They had many rules, and like many civilizations, if you break their rules in those times, you would have your hands cut off or you would be killed depending on what they were. So they were actually very peaceful with low crime rates because they had swift justice imparted on them. So what helped actually cause their downfall once the Spaniards came was the fact that we have those two brothers previously mentioned. One ended up killing the other to dethrone him in order to take over as that last Sapa Inca. But that was what pretty much set up the downfall for the Incans when the Spaniards came. Coming into Peru was the conquistadors, which came from Spain, led by Francisco Pizarro. What we don't know actually is the fact that by the time he successfully colonized Peru, he had done it on his 3rd attempt. Originally, he came into Panama, and from there, tried 3 times to getting into Peru. The 3rd time, he gained approval from the crown, and finally made it onto the shores. What they came for was that religious expansion of Catholicism at the time, and obviously to seek new opportunities and riches beyond imagination. And they did so in finding it in Peru. When they got there, they met the Incans, and when they got there, they spread their diseases, kind of like what you see with Christopher Columbus and the Native Americans here. In Peru, you saw a 9 million population dwindle down to 600,000 people. Over 93% of the original indigenous people died over a span of 150 years once the Spanish came in and started colonizing Peru. When you look at the key players, you see out of the Incans, the last Sapa Inca, Atahualpa, and Francisco Pizarro as your conquistador, the main one, right? Now, what happens when these two worlds collide? There can only really be one winner. And what ends up happening is Spain managed to manipulate taking over the Incas. What happens is Atahualpa gets captured and held for ransom. His ransom was 1 room filled with gold, 2 rooms filled with silver. It ended up totaling 6 tons of gold and 13 tons of silver. That was still not enough to pay for his freedom. What ended up happening though in that time was he was converted to Catholicism, learned Spanish, and helped mediate integrating the Incans with the Spaniards. Except at the end of it all, he was decapitated, killed, and that led to the full conquest of the Incan nation and ultimately taking over Peru and establishing the capital that actually exists today, still Lima. So When we look at colonization as a whole, we see that it's going to be two different worlds. They're going to come together, and only one person is going to come out. There's no peaceful solution. It happens here, it happens there, and it happened in Peru with the Incas. Today, there's a small population. When you look at what an indigenous person looks like today, you don't see that anymore in what a normal Peruvian would look like. Now there's a mix of people, a mix of colors, and a mix of religion and race. At the end of the day, we see that they were taken over, and what we speak now is Spanish, and only recently gained independence from Spain and the Crown. All right, and that ends that speech there. Again, I still have my 6 low battery in this one, and 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm gonna count myself 6.